Initiating theme song. It's really important that we don't talk through the theme song, just so you know.
Okay.
Yeah, you really don't want to do that. It's really not classy, really unprofessional podcast-wise. So just don't do it. It's not funny. This is serious. You're not supposed to talk through the theme song. It's just bad etiquette. All right. Welcome. Thanks for joining me. Lauren's first time on the podcast.
First time. Well,
Yeah.
second, really. I mean, the interview.
Well, the
Does that
interview,
count?
yeah. I don't know. Sure, it counts, but this is different because it's much
All
more
right.
casual and not nearly as serious and
Right.
live.
Live.
Yeah. So we are going to be talking about some movie crazy people.
Yep.
Yeah. So I guess why don't you go ahead and give your kind of relevant background to this topic? I
Okay.
guess.
Well, first, I'd like to start off by saying I'm in no way an expert on any of these topics.
Right. I should also say I am also not an expert on any of these topics.
People get a
None of
little
this.
touchy.
Right. None of this should be construed as any sort of medical advice,
Right.
or any actual I haven't done any actual scientific research.
Okay. Yeah, no, this is just all my personal opinions and just I guess a little maybe touching a little bit from experiences that I've had working in the mental health field. But that's about as far as it goes.
Without breaking any HIPAA laws, of course.
Right. Yeah, no names,
Mm-mm.
no identifying information.
Right.
Um, so I graduated college with a bachelor's degree in psychology, and I worked most recently in the mental health field as a mental health counselor for an intensive in-home program that serviced children and adolescents and their families who were in some sort of crisis period in their life. And we would go in and stabilize. I was really lucky to be able to work in this program because I was able to work as a part of a clinical team. So it was myself and then a clinician, and we would go and we would basically, treat people. We would do therapy, and we'd also there was some coordination involved in case management stuff, but a lot. It was very very clinical. It was probably, I mean, with a bachelor's degree, in psychology, it only gets you so far. So
What do you mean when you say it was very clinical?
it was very clinical as far as the therapy. I mean,
Okay.
we were doing therapy with clients, and with just a bachelor's degree, you don't always get the opportunity to do that.
Oh,
Um,
okay. Okay,
you
I
need to
gotcha.
further your education to do that. So, working as part of that team with my clinician, I was able to really get in there and get my hands dirty as far as the therapy aspect, which was really really cool. Um,
That is really neat. Because I think a lot of people would like to kind of put that hat on, you know what I mean, just to
mhm,
kind of see what it's like. Because a lot of us, like, I've personally never been to any kind of therapy or anything like that, so the only
mhm,
exposure I have to it is what's in the media, you know.
sure.
How would you say like that your did your experiences compare to like things you've seen in movies and TV and stuff like that? I mean, is it all like
Yeah, well, because a lot of times we would, would be individual therapy, or
mm-hmm.
there would be sometimes we participated with our clients in some group therapy,
Okay.
which I've seen a lot of on TV and movies, the
Right.
group therapy aspect, because it's used in so many different settings. It's used for mental health, it's used for substance abuse, it's used, so I think that gets the most media probably. Um, yeah, and we did that. And I mean, some of the cases, like I think, you and I have talked about this before, and some of the cases were pretty surface level, and maybe some kids that were starting to get into trouble, or had behavior issues, or really young kids with, ADHD, that just kind of, in a certain setting of their life, whether it be school or home, or out in the community, they found it hard to, control themselves. But some of the cases that I had were a lot deeper than that.
Yeah.
I had a teenage girl with a delusional disorder, which was super intense and so interesting. Um, some of the aspects of this case were so um, they were just so individual and really interesting. I
Like
worked with my
delusional in the sense that like she was kind of like living in a reality that was like she was like imagining kind of thing.
Yeah, she had a false sense of reality, and hers was it was very specific. She actually was obsessed with Michael Jackson
Oh.
and had this false sense of um, a feeling that they were connected on some
Whoa.
level. And this was after his passing. Obviously, she was a teenager, so she was very young when he did pass. But yeah, she had this false sense of knowing him and thinking that they connected on some personal level, and even from you know. Beyond the grave was able to speak to her and give her
That's fascinating.
messages and clues. Oh my God, it was. I mean, it was very sad because her life was hell and
Oh,
her
of
family
course.
was
Of
hell. But I
course.
mean, it was, from a professional standpoint, it was incredibly interesting. And um, I feel privileged that I got the honor to, to work with her and
Sure.
to try to help her
So, yeah,
in
so
her
what do
life.
you so I mean, what do you how do you handle even that kind of thing? Like you obviously you can't just say to her like, "Sweetie, like you can't talk to Michael." Like obviously that's not going to do it. So do you like
Right.
kind of try to let her talk through it and kind of like put the connect the dots herself, or does that even work? Like
Yeah, well, I mean, that would be the end goal for
right.
sure. And like I said, the program that I worked in was, well, I didn't say this today, but in the past, it was a 6-month program.
Okay.
So I mean, in the grand scheme of
Yeah.
things, that's incredibly short term,
Yeah,
especially for
sure.
somebody with a delusional disorder who's only
Right.
16. So, uh, and I think, a lot of times, well, maybe not a lot of times, but in this case particular, we worked with a specialist at Yale as well. I mean, we had to call them the big guns because this was
Yeah.
huge. So they were even thinking that it might have been a budding uh, schizophrenic disorder.
Ooh.
So, which is
Yeah.
a lot of time they start out that way because you don't want to diagnose a 16-year-old with schizophrenia or schizoaffective disorder. I think it's
Sure.
called now.
Sure.
The
Yeah,
names
I
of the
know.
diagnoses change all the time, but
Mhm.
um, so they were. It was definitely a case that they were going to keep their eye on because it could have been starting out as a delusional disorder that kind of grew into
Something more
schizophrenia.
dangerous, something a little more
Yeah, yeah.
malignant.
And actually, when we first got the case, we went in totally under the assumption that it was OCD. We
Really?
thought she had, yeah, that was what she came in with. That was her diagnosis coming into the program. And I think, with so many of these disorders, even go,
I just want to pause you for a second.
yeah,
Maybe you could, if we could just take a quick sidebar. I think this would be an opportunity to maybe, when you say the phrase OCD,
yes,
that's a phrase that I think that gets overused
it is.
way, 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 way too much.
Oh, yeah.
Like it's an actual mental disorder
Oh, yeah.
that people really, really struggle with, and it's not like, oh, I have to make sure the dishes are done before I leave the house. Like it's a lot deeper than that kind of thing.
Right.
Like when people say like, oh, for my first pet peeve is when people say, "Oh, I'm so OCD." No,
Mm-hmm.
the phrase would
Mm-hmm.
be, "I
I'm so
have,
OCD
I,
about this.
yeah, I have OCD,"
Right.
or
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I suffer from
Right.
OCD."
Suffer from would be more
Right.
accurate. Yeah.
It's not an adjective; it is a noun. So you can't say "I am a noun." Yeah, you can't.
Absolutely.
It doesn't work
Oh,
that way.
yeah. And,
Um,
and that's a great point. That OCD is,
if you had OCD, you'd
the
probably be using
term.
the phrase properly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you wouldn't go around like being proud of it and telling people.
Right. And I
Um,
know that's not really how people are using it, but I think that it's worth addressing. Can you kind of explain what obsessive compulsive disorder (OCD) actually is? I think.
sure. Yeah, so it's a disorder where you obsess about something in particular, which causes you to act compulsively in a ritualistic manner because you think that participating in that ritual will ease the obsessive thoughts in your
Okay.
head.
For
Sometimes the
example,
thoughts can
like
be somebody's gonna die if I don't, um, take 7 steps every time I walk in a certain direction of the room, or if I don't, turn the
like the
light
yeah,
switch
on and
on and
off eight
off
times.
7 times.
Right, right,
Usually it's a pattern, it's a specific number.
right.
So in that
Okay.
case, it would be 7. If I don't do this, then my mother is going to get in a car accident and die. I mean, it depends on where your train of
Yeah,
thought
so it's
is.
actually a much more serious thing than
Oh
I
yeah,
think a lot of people think that it is. Like it's you
yeah,
really have these dots connected in your head that are just so could not be more unrelated.
oh my god,
And it's
it's
about am I wrong in saying that it's usually about some tiny little thing like literally like flipping a light switch or taking a certain number of steps or like making sure
sure.
that yeah, like it's some tiny little thing. Like it's not about like anything that actually has any effect on anything at all.
Right. It's usually unrealistic.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, I think I just lost my train of thought.
Well, that's okay.
Oh,
Yeah, go ahead.
well, no, I was just going to sort of piggyback just very quickly on what you said about it being overused. And I mean, I think a lot of diagnoses these days, get sort of the terms
Sure.
get thrown around. OCD is one of the top ones. So is
Mhm.
bipolar. Oh, I'm so
Mhm.
bipolar. Like,
No,
I'm
you're not
things like
bipolar.
that.
You get upset and you
Yeah,
get
you're moody.
happy. Yeah, you not even moody, but just like, oh, I just get so mad when bad
Yeah,
things
you're
happen,
mad.
and then 1 second my emotions gonna flip. Yeah, you're a human being. That's how it works. Like
Exactly. Oh yeah. But these true diagnoses go so much deeper than that. And I
they
mean,
do.
just you don't just slap a label on somebody. You can't slap a diagnosis on someone. I mean,
But
you
people,
have
well,
to,
people
there's
are
criteria.
yes, and people are unfortunately very ready to slap these diagnoses on themselves and
Yeah.
somehow
Oh
wear it
yeah.
as some sort of like badge. Like it's really strange, And I think I don't even want to go down the road of how dangerous it is to label yourself as anything,
Right.
let alone having some sort of mental disorder or something that people like. It does dishonor to people who I don't know if dishonor. It kind of slaps in the face like people who actually do struggle from these problems that they have
Absolutely.
that really fucks with their life. You know.
Absolutely. Oh yeah. Because and they're saying how first of all, how dare you? How dare you compare
Yeah. Right.
your tiny problem to my life? And also it kind of I feel like people think that people who really struggle from these things that other people aren't going to take them serious. Because so many
Exactly.
people are going around claiming that they have it. So,
Exactly.
it brings a lot of
Um,
shame.
I mean, I mean, knowing, having a little bit of insight into this kind of thing, do you find yourself like in the grocery store, like in line behind somebody going like, yeah, that's a bit of a sociopathic tendency this person's displaying right now? Do you find yourself doing
Um,
stuff like that?
sometimes I, probably more often with like family members and friends
Yeah,
and,
okay. People
um,
actually know things
people that I
about their
know and can
psychology,
actually
sure.
study a little bit.
Sure. Well,
But
because like for example, Jessica knows a lot about anatomy and physiology,
mhm,
and she'll just see some random person in the grocery store sometimes, and she'll be like, "That person has some sort of like hip dysplasia or something, something like that." She'll be like, "Oh,
right.
they're AC4 or whatever. I don't know, whatever is
Yeah.
might have some sort of issue or something." You know what I mean? She'll say
Oh
some.
yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I wonder. I guess there's always, if you have a certain depth of knowledge about some kind of topic, you just happen to notice the things in the world, and if it's something about people, I guess
Oh
things are
yeah.
gonna jump
I
out at
think
you.
my thoughts usually go more to like, what is going on with this person at home? Like, why are you so mad at, like, why are you screaming
Yeah.
at the cashier right now? Like, what's happening in your life? That's making you,
Do you
so
ever?
mad that your mustard wasn't on sale. I mean, I don't
Well, yeah.
understand.
I mean, I guess yeah. That's a whole other topic, but it's things that people are mad about is never the thing that they're really mad about.
No, it always goes deeper.
It always goes deeper. That's why I think
Hmm.
that bickering is very healthy and talking shit and stuff like that. Busting
Yeah.
people's balls, saying exactly what's coming into your mind and treating it lightly. Even
Right.
from your own kind of point of view.
Right.
Because if you don't, anything you don't say will get built up. Anything that doesn't happen right now.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Squash it. Nip
Yep.
it in the bud.
Yep. So so do you think? I mean, I guess everybody, to kind of get toward veer toward our actual topic a little bit.
Mm.
Um, yeah, it seems like everybody kind of enjoys the whole crazy people in the media thing, you know, like
Hmm.
crazy people in movies and stuff like that. Um, did you, obviously, you know, you're into that kind of thing, and I am
Hmm.
too. Did you find that you were kind of more interested in it after you were kind of trained?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Because I knew more about it. I was a
Right,
little bit
right,
more educated
right.
about it. So, things that I had been taught. I mean, it was cool to see it, played out in a movie or something like that.
Well, I
And
mean, from what I understand, you know, a lot of portrayals of psychopaths in movies, I think movies tend to just go right for the psychopath thing and miss a lot of opportunities to do really, like, you could make a really interesting movie about somebody that has OCD, and you don't see that very much. Like, I know there are
right.
instances of it, like the show Monk. He had like OCD and like did
Yeah.
really weird
Yeah. Oh,
shit.
yeah.
And from what I understand, that was a pretty good portrayal
Hmm.
of OCD. Um, but you know, I think that there's some really everybody, like I said, everybody goes straight for the psychopath thing, and I think a lot of them tend to kind of miss the mark, the way I
Yeah.
understand, you know.
Yeah.
um like for example, the Hannibal Lecter character.
Hmm.
How familiar are you with the Hannibal Lecter, his portrayal?
Well, I mean, Silence of the Lambs.
Okay.
I'm very familiar
Well, there was
familiar
like a
with
trilogy of those
the
movies, and
trailer.
there was like a whole
Yeah, yeah, and I'm pretty sure I saw all of those. And I know
okay.
that I think we started watching that Hannibal show, but I don't.
Right, yeah, yeah. Well, you should definitely watch it.
I know, I know.
But the point being here is that from actual psychologists that have studied the character of Hannibal Lecter, he's just a fantasy. Like
Oh yeah,
he doesn't actually fit into any of these categories, which I think makes him an even more brilliant character, because your
hmm,
instinct is to go, oh, he's obviously a psychopath, but he isn't. Like, he doesn't
right,
fit any of these categories, and he does display characteristics that a psychopath or even a sociopath wouldn't, you
right,
know. And it's like, you don't really, you can, if you watch like his origin story, you don't really, is it a nature or nurture thing, you don't really know. And he
hmm,
seems to kind of like really lean into it in a way
right,
that somebody who doesn't have those mental faculties of empathy and stuff like that, he almost seems like he's not neutral as far as his emotions and stuff. It's like he goes the opposite way, like on purpose, which isn't,
yeah,
as the way I understand it, isn't really the way a psychopath behaves. Like, they're really just in that kind of stuck in that non-empathetic, like neutral, like, you know.
yeah. I think like a typical psychopath or sociopath, even, I think that they're a little bit more reckless.
Sure.
They're not quite as calculated, and
Yeah,
some
he's like
are.
hyper
Listen, everyone's
calculated.
different. Yeah, exactly. Manipulative
Yeah.
and brilliant, and that's not always the case. I mean, these are regular Joes. A lot of people
Sure.
that suffer from these
Well,
things.
I think it's worth mentioning that I think, um, nobody really knows how many. We can get into the difference between a psychopath and a sociopath in a minute,
Hmm.
but I mean, nobody really knows how many of them are really out there, because I think the theory is most psychopaths and sociopaths just figure out how to adapt to society, and everything works out okay. Like, you
Right.
might get as far as like, yeah, that guy's a little awkward sometimes, but like, you know what I mean? Like,
Oh yeah.
if you're a psychopath, that doesn't mean you're going to murder a bunch of people, you know, because if
Exactly.
that were the case, there'd be a lot more murderers,
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
you
The
know?
world will be full of them. Yeah. Oh yeah. And I mean, it's so complex, really. It's hard
Hmm.
to sort of nail down, is this person a psychopath? Is
Right.
this person I mean, because there's so many components that go into it, and so many other, diagnoses that really that you're pulling from. I mean,
Sure.
sometimes these things happen from, trauma. Sometimes, they come sort of out of maybe a psychotic break, or a
Sure.
delusion, or
Yeah.
delusional disorder, and
Yeah. Or some or physical trauma.
or physical trauma. Absolutely.
You know,
Oh
not
yeah.
necessarily emotional trauma. Could actually like hit, like fuck your head up and damage part of your
Exactly.
brain that
You
would
get a
make you
traumatic
the
brain
exact
injury.
that would make you a textbook psychopath, you know.
Right. Right.
Um
Yeah. You can sort
but
of lose that,
mhm.
ability to empathize with others, and that sort of changes everything
Sure.
when you can't do
Sure.
that.
Yeah. Yeah, so yeah, it is very interesting. I think the guy who invented like the psychopath test, like the most recent, like hyper accurate one, took the test and found he himself
What's the
was a
psychopath?
psychopath, and was like, "Oh shit." Okay.
Yeah. Why is that not surprising?
Yeah,
It's
cuz I
just-
think he did like some kind of double, he did some kind of test where he like, I think he took the test and then took a bunch of other test results and
Mm.
blindly scored them. and then
Oh,
looked through the ones that were psychopaths, and his was in there. Like he didn't take the
okay.
test knowing that he
Right.
was, you know, something
Exactly.
like that. But it's like legit that he took the test and actually is a functioning psychopath and was like,
Wow.
oh fuck, like,
Yeah. I shouldn't take this
do
test.
I tell
I
my
should take
wife? I don't know.
What do I do now?
Mm,
Oh my God.
just sweep that under the rug.
That's funny.
But I mean, I guess the moral of that whole thing is that like it's not necessarily a doom, you know, a doom diagnosis to be like, yeah, I'm a psychopath. Well, gotta lock you up. Sorry, dude. You know,
Right.
it's there's ways to be functional and stuff like that. But
Sure. Oh yeah.
again, back to the topic, we love those stories of people who, you know, just can't hang and just they have to kill. They're just bloodthirsty because they're a psychopath, of course.
Exactly.
Um,
Yeah. Which is why I think, well, I think some of the characters, some like historical movie villains, such as, um, Jason,
hmm
or Freddy Krueger, or maybe not Freddy Krueger, but
Well, whatever. I mean, they
people
all
like
get
Michael
thrown around.
Myers. I think these people were labeled psychopaths in their time, and I mean, really, I mean, they're a fictional character in a slasher film. I mean, it's not, Hannibal Lecter, at least, at least it was sort of researched, you know what I mean, and they
Yeah,
tried to sort of give him certain traits,
yeah, yeah.
and and it was done more tastefully than somebody who's just gonna like stab you with a knife 27
Well, I
times.
think that's the really intriguing thing about Hannibal Lecter and why that will be a timeless character forever because he feels he's basically a supervillain,
Mm,
but he's not so outlandish that like there's enough realism to his character that or at least it's in that gray area of things that we think are possible
mm-hmm.
but are not actually, like the fact that he's like hyper intelligent, like off the
Mm-hmm.
charts IQ, also master martial artist,
Right.
insane chef, you know, a crazy social manipulator. You know, like his
Right.
social skills are insanely off the charts too. You
Mm-hmm.
know, he's a good-looking guy. You know,
Mm-hmm.
he's like just everything that a person might want, plus all the plus he doesn't give a shit about like all he wants to do is just like kill these people who he thinks deserve to die. That
Right.
and that's a crazy thing about him too. It's like he doesn't really necessarily have a bloodlust. He's almost like this weird vigilante,
Right.
you know. But also, if you get in his way, he'll kill you too. Like he
Right.
doesn't, you know. Which I think is a really interesting thing about the Hannibal show, is that he ends up developing a very close personal relationship with the main character,
Mm.
um, and that whole thing kind of plays out like they have this weird bromance that goes on throughout the show
And the main
where
character being like a
um,
cop or something.
no, yeah, the main character is Will Graham, who is Edward Norton's character in the Hannibal
Okay.
movie.
Yep.
Yeah, so
Yep.
so everybody's recast obviously, but that's
Mm-hmm.
who Will Graham is. And
Gotcha.
so it's actually before it's discovered that Hannibal Lecter is this mass murderer. He's the
Mm-hmm.
cop on the case, and he's using Hannibal as a consultant to try to solve the murders that Hannibal is committing.
Okay.
And the
Okay.
show takes the Hannibal movie plot and kind of goes before it and then leads up into it and then steps
Oh, okay.
into yeah, and then steps into I think a little bit afterward too. And they had plans to move into the Silence of the Lambs storyline, but they couldn't. Something weird happened where like people were watching the show, but it wasn't showing up in the ratings, and they
Oh,
couldn't quite
was it
secure.
canceled?
Yeah, it got canceled. Yeah, a couple of years
Oh,
ago. It
okay.
got 3 seasons in, and it was amazing. But I mean,
Mm,
that show easily could have gone 6 seasons because it would have gone into all the other known
a lot of
Hannibal's
material
plot line.
there.
Yes,
Yeah.
a lot. Yeah, a lot of in between stories you could tell, stuff like that. I would have loved to see
Hmm.
Buffalo Bill recast. You
I was
know,
just, yeah,
that
you know what?
Clarice Starling. We never got to see her recast.
Right,
Oh my
right,
God,
right.
it would have been so amazing.
So that Buffalo Bill, or I was gonna call him Wild Bill. I couldn't remember his name. I knew it
I
was
think
something
it's
with Bill.
Buffalo Bill. Yeah.
I think, yeah. The funny thing to me is that I mean, I think that character is more of a more accurate portrayal of a psychopath than
Yeah, I
Hannibal
think.
Lecter.
Well, I think that's the whole plot of the movie is that Hannibal
Mm,
Lecter is this hyper genius, and it's easy for him to just analyze these regular run of the mill psychopaths. But
right.
you know what
Oh,
I
yeah,
mean?
yeah, yeah.
And it's at a point in the state of our legal system and psychology in general, that they haven't quite nailed down what makes these people up yet. And Hannibal Lecter's like, yeah, it's easy, you just connect these dots. And they're like, that's why he becomes the consultant to the police, because the police and psychologists don't
Oh,
have it quite nailed down yet.
yeah.
That's why you got to watch
Yeah.
that show Mindhunter, because that's about the very infancy of anybody even deciding to study that as a phenomenon. They're just like, yeah, some people like to murder, but this guy's
Right.
like, no, I think there's like a pattern, like I think there's a disorder that we can study and learn kind of the ins and outs of. And
Interesting.
Mindhunter, and it's directed by David Fincher.
What's it on Netflix?
Yes,
Right.
and David Fincher has done, I think, a couple of the Bond movies, if I'm not mistaken. Um, he's just an amazing director, and that
Hmm.
show really, like, it just grabs you, like it grabs you by the face, and it's like, watch me, like,
Yeah. All
yeah,
right.
you can't,
I'll
once you
check it
start
out.
it, yeah, good luck stopping it once you start
Yeah.
it.
Oh
um
man.
yeah, it's really really good, and I don't think any of the psychopath murderers that are in that show are, none of them are real. I think it's all
Okay.
fictional, but it's like a period piece of that time, and it's just interesting to see the psychology of the people that are close to the very small team that starts traveling the country to these different prisons and meeting
Hmm.
these murderers and sitting down and talking with them, because everyone else is like, why are you doing this? Why are you
Right.
even talking to these people? What are you trying to accomplish? Why are you spending so much time with them? What's wrong with you? Like, and it's crazy because I imagine it was that kind of struggle where there's this guy who's just like, listen, man, like there's something to figure out here. I don't know what it is, so I can't explain it to you, but there's something we need to get to the bottom of. And everyone's like, whatever. If you want to sit,
Okay.
if you feel like you sitting in a across the table from somebody who murdered their own mother and a bunch of women and locked them in a shed, like, I guess, man, whatever.
Do your thing.
Yeah, so I'm really curious to see what season two of that is like,
All
because
right.
season one was like really about the politicking and the struggle of just being able to get the clearance.
I should watch it
You
and then
okay,
we.
sweetie? Okay. I just heard a thud.
Oh,
Just
I
want to make
should
sure.
watch it and then we should do like a review or
Yeah,
something
I would love
on
to.
the
Yeah,
first season.
yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, what you should do is watch that and watch Hannibal, and then we can revisit,
Mm.
kind of talk about both of
Yeah.
them. Um, yeah, because
Gonna
you
have
would
a lot
really,
there.
yeah, they're really, really good.
Okay.
I can't wait to see. I mean, it's been a couple years. I mean, there was talks about that Hannibal series, them doing a movie.
Mm.
Um, but I would really love to see it revisited another time. Somebody will do it in some other
Right.
kind of way, That's why I really like. Are you a fan of Sherlock Holmes?
I mean, I'm not a fan, but
Okay,
I
well, you're
I don't
familiar
really.
with the
Yeah,
Sherlock, yeah.
familiar.
That's I mean, that character has been around for over 100 years
Yeah.
now. But I love all the different ways it gets revisited, and I think Hannibal has the potential to be revisited many times as well. So I'm curious to
Okay.
see what they do with that.
Yeah.
But it's dark stuff. I think it doesn't appeal to the masses. That's really the problem with it. That was the problem with the show, was that it's very, he's murdering people and doing crazy shit, and you need to show it, so it
Right.
was like it was a really really gory, dark
Graphic.
show.
Yeah.
There's a lot. Yeah, I'm not even sure if I could watch it now at this point in my life. But at the
Wow.
time when I was like watching a lot of dark stuff and really into dark stuff, it was like, this is great.
Okay. Oh wow.
Yeah, yeah, it's really
Okay.
really neat.
Well, I'll have to check it out.
Hmm. Um, yeah, another character that I apparently people call a psychopath that isn't necessarily one is the Joker
Yes.
from Batman.
Yep. Yep.
Um, I don't know how familiar you are with the character, but for the uninitiated, the Joker is basically this guy that just shows up one day and has clown makeup on and just starts wreaking havoc on Gotham City. And I'm only super familiar with the stuff from the more recent movies with Christian Bale as Batman.
Yeah. Me too.
And the whole idea of the Joker is that he also doesn't fit any psychological profiles, so nobody can quite figure him out. The
Right.
difference, I think the main difference between him and Hannibal Lecter is that he really wears it on his sleeve how much he enjoys the stuff that he does.
Oh
And
yeah.
he seems to have some sort of twisted, like a nihilist philosophy behind it or something, that he's
Mhm.
like, why don't I just fuck with everybody? And like, this scene in one of the in the Dark Knight where he has the the two ferries where one of them's full of prisoners, one of them is full of the prison guards,
Mm-hmm.
and they have to choose which one of them is going to get blown up or whatever. And he's like, I don't know, that'll be fun, whatever, you know.
Right. Right.
And like, yeah,
Yeah,
sure,
he doesn't
morally,
try to hide it.
yeah, it's like the railroad. The philosophical question of the railroad. You do you pull the lever to run over the five children or the one guy? You know what I mean? Like, how do you make how do you make the
Right.
call? It's like
This or
it's like
that.
a take on
What
that
if?
kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah,
Yeah,
he's another
yeah.
one
That
that's not
character
a
was.
yeah. But yeah,
I
with
mean,
all
I think the thing to remember too is even about Hannibal and the Joker. I mean, I think for the sake of I don't know, just grouping them into a category. I think we that we've labeled them, or maybe director, the movie, labeled them psychopaths, and I think like we've been talking about it, that's not always true as far as uh, diagnoses and definitions and things like that. But
hmm
I think that I think both characters definitely displayed traits of psychopathy, and
yes,
you know what I mean? So and I think, yeah, does it miss the mark a little bit? Yeah. I mean, it's
yeah,
Hollywood, so it's going to, but I think that, I mean, I think another one, Christian Bale's character in speaking of Christian Bale in American Psycho, Patrick Bateman.
yes,
Um,
no, yeah, yes, no. Is that Patrick? Yeah, Patrick Bateman.
Pretty sure it's Patrick
That
Bateman.
is his name. Okay, that wait, who's the Patrick Bateman? But then who's the Stephen King character?
Female or male?
The male one. What am I thinking
Uh,
of? Yeah, because it's Patrick Bateman. Yeah, he's like he works for some sort of corporate,
he's like a Wall Street
yeah, like a Wall
yuppie.
Street guy, and see, and apparently he is a pretty accurate portrayal of a psychopath, right? That's what the article we were both looking at. Is
Yeah.
that what it said? He's
Yeah. I
actually
mean,
pretty accurate.
yeah, I think he was, he wasn't like the top, in the top three or whatever, but I think that he was sort of in the middle.
Yeah,
And I think even watching the movie, I mean, I used to I used to really like that movie, which I don't know what that says about me, but and so I used to watch it a lot,
yeah,
and I think I mean, this is going back to like when I was in college and stuff, but I think that was a pretty I think it was pretty accurate. And I think, well, the thing about that too is, again, it's so complex. So to say he was a psychopath, I mean,
yeah.
because, it's sort of at the end, it's kind of like, the movie, spoiler alert, but it's like, was it all in his head? Was it really happening? So then it's like, okay, well, we're not just talking about psychopathy here. Now we might be going into, a delusional disorder or something, it's
Yeah, like a blend of a
schizophrenia.
bunch
I
of
mean,
stuff. Yeah, right, right.
yeah, you know what I mean? Like or was he having a psychotic break? Was it just an episode? I mean,
Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
true.
so
Yeah, because a lot of these movies only take place over like what, like a couple days or a couple
right,
weeks. It's not like a lifetime that you get to see a development of a character, what
exactly.
actually happens and how they react to it and stuff like that. So
Right,
that's a really good point. It's really hard to actually accurately, if you unless you could sit down with these characters, and
right.
have a panel of psychologists, sit down with them. I guess it is really tough to make the call one way or the other because it's hard enough with real people when you do get to know everything about them and sit down with them.
Yeah. Oh my
Yeah.
God. Yeah.
Um, So yeah, so we're kind of referencing an article that we both read about somebody who actually analyzed these, and I think it happened in like 2014, but it kind of cropped up again. But
Hmm.
apparently, the number one most realistic psychopath. You're right. Patrick Bateman was not on the list of most realistic. Um, is Anton Chigurh, or what? I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but the bad guy, Javier Bardem's character in No Country for Old Men.
Hmm.
You've seen this movie?
I have. Long time ago. I know.
Crazy movie.
Can I swear?
All right, go ahead. Yeah, of course you can.
That's
Come on.
it was that was a fucked up movie.
That movie was fucked up, dude. Well, that was the
Yeah.
whole point. The whole point is that like fucked up shit happens in the world and the
Yeah.
good guy doesn't always win and the bad guy gets away and like shit goes unsolved and
Yeah.
people get
Yeah.
involved in shit they should not have gotten involved in and like that's the whole and is that another David Fincher movie? No, who directed that movie?
I don't know.
Okay, Google.
I
Who
couldn't tell you.
who directed No Country for Old Men? Ethan Coen. Oh, it's Coen Brothers. Duh. Coen Brothers
Yeah.
movie. But yeah, so I guess his portrayal of a psychopath is pretty accurate because so I think the through line that I apparently of like these psychopathic characters is that they end up like fixated on something
Mhm.
and they just beeline to that thing, and anything that happens they're just like, well, that was getting in between me and this thing, so like what am I supposed to do, you know? Where it's
Right.
like
They
he's
have
trying to find,
like a
yeah,
very weak conscience
or non-existent. It's
or
just like, dude,
non-existent.
you
Yeah.
know, I mean, his whole thing was like, I flip a coin, kill the guy if it's heads, and if it's not, you know, you're good.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
whatever. And he just like so nonchalant about just like putting the thing up against, like, just dead.
Blowing
Like,
the brains right out.
yeah, like it was just nothing at all to him. And when,
Right. Yeah. Well, and I do appreciate that about his character, and I see
yeah, there was no
he's
pleasure
at the top of the
involved.
list. Exactly.
Yeah,
It was very understated. You know what I
yeah,
mean? It
yeah.
wasn't. I think some of the problems with the other ones is that there's a lot of glitz and glamour
Right,
involved. This
right.
guy, I mean, it
He
was
was
very.
robotic.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I think that's,
Exactly.
yeah. Actually, you know what? That's a term. It's tough because like I think that would be a good term to use. Like he was an example of a psychopath who there was almost no societal adjustment whatsoever.
Right.
You know, he's like the
Agreed.
very far end of it where like somehow he made it to that point in his life without needing to adjust socially at all.
Right.
Because I think what was it? He was an assassin in the movie.
Yeah. He was like a like I don't want to say a
He
hitman, but
yeah,
yeah,
he
they
was like a
hired him.
thug. You know, he was like a
Yeah.
hired thug,
Mhm.
and I think even what happened? I think even the people that hired him ended up dead, and he was just like, all right, well, I guess I'm just gonna go wander the earth now or whatever. Like the movie
Yeah.
ends with him just like walking out of a
Yeah.
house after
Right.
killing somebody, and like that's it. The movie's over. Like they're dead. Like that's it.
Right.
And like
Yeah, it
there's
kind of just
no,
leaves you
yeah, you're just
staring at
like
the screen. Like, what?
like you're just caught with your throat and your breath in your throat. You know, it's
Is
like
my door locked?
yeah, exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really, yeah. I mean, it is definitely one of those movies that makes you think like anything really could happen at any time,
hmm
and I could take all the precautions, and you know,
That's it. You can only do what you can do.
yeah,
But people
yeah,
are gonna be who they are, and
yeah,
you know.
yeah. It is wild because there's definitely people like that, you know, roaming around. Hopefully, they're either trying to adjust. Because that's the thing is, you know, even a psychopath who has no empathy understands logic,
Right.
and logic tells you that it's easier to assimilate than to not.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So unless you
Mm-hmm.
want to be like
Oh
running
yeah.
from the law all the time, which is inconvenient, you
Right.
should probably figure out how to like understand social cues by reading body language and stuff like
Wow.
that. You know what I mean? Which is useful
Yeah.
even for a non-psychopath.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's just
I
kind
have
of something
found.
to try to figure out along the way. But
Yeah, right.
um,
But it's
you know,
stuff
I
that the
think
rest of us find out by accident just through, you
right.
know, trial and error of living life. Whereas I think the way I understand it is that psychopaths kind of have to be guided toward like, listen, if you want to be functional, you have to like learn this stuff. It has to be taught through, you
Oh
know,
yeah. They have to like play pretend. You know
right,
what I mean?
right. Fake it till you
Essentially, and
make it, or just fake it forever. I don't know, whatever,
right.
whichever it
And
is.
I don't know if you're familiar with the show. I think it was on HBO. Dexter.
Yeah, yeah. I saw a couple seasons of
Well,
that.
yeah, we love Dexter. It got it, you know, like a lot of series, it got kind of weird at the end.
Yeah, we
It
don't have to
gets a
get
little
into that though.
hokey, and
Yeah,
yeah. But yeah, but I actually I think his portrayal of I think he would probably be labeled a sociopath, and that I mean
yeah.
serial killer, but more of a sociopath. Um, I think his the way
He
he
had like
sort
the
of
code and
describes
like,
that
yeah,
he had his own code,
yeah,
which a lot of them do, and he would and he said many times, I have to he would talk about it, like when they're talking
yeah.
in the background,
He
like
had a
I would have
fixation.
I have to well, yeah, but not even about the killing, but just how to survive in everyday life. Oh,
Sure.
he'd say, he'd be
Yeah,
narrating
yeah,
a scene.
exactly. It would
Oh,
have,
my
yeah.
sister's looking at me like this. What does she want me to say? Okay, what can I say? He'd run through
Mm-hmm.
a few things in his head. Okay, I think this is what I should say back. And I think that's pretty true when it comes
Yeah.
to having to, like you're saying, like assimilate and sort of fake it till you make it. And how do I blend in with the rest of society when I'm not like them at all?
Yeah, and you know that happens to the rest of us too, but you know, it's automatic and it happens in our subconscious. There are parts of our brain that handle that for us.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's very much the exact same thing.
Yeah.
And even I mean, I'm pretty sure I'm not a psychopath, but I have found myself in that exact situation where something's happening. I'm like, okay, what do I need to do and say right now to make this, you know what I mean? To like not,
Oh, sure.
you
Oh,
know.
sure.
So
Yeah.
that's not to say that listeners, if
Yeah.
you have had these thoughts,
Yeah.
if you're being analytical of a situation in the midst of it, that does not mean you're a psychopath.
Yes, no, there is a big
But you might
difference
be.
between analyze yeah, but you might between analyzing a situation and, having to calculate everything you say and every
Sure.
move you
Right.
make just
Every
in order
single thing.
to trick people into believing that you're,
Right.
a
Because that
functional human
automatic
being.
part of your brain is not does not work or is not working properly.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Because you don't have it, because they don't have empathy, so they
Right.
can't, how, yeah, when we're in a situation, if you're fighting with your significant other or whatever, and you're like, well, what can I say right now that's gonna, sort of not blow up in my face, or what can I say to sort of calm this person? You're saying that, out of empathy, out of, you're
Right.
saying it out
Right.
of just knowing what the situation can bring, whereas, they're saying it because they don't know, they can't put themselves in someone else's shoes, and
Yeah.
they're just sort of, panicking to think of the next thing to say that sounds right.
Right. Well, they might not be panicking.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe not. Yeah. I guess it
Yeah.
depends on
Yeah,
who you're talking to.
depends. It depends. Yeah. So would you be able to maybe lay out the differences between a psychopath and a sociopath? Are you familiar
Yeah.
with the differences?
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
I think they're very similar. I
Right.
think psychopathy tends to be a lot more violent in its nature. I think sociopathy is it's more really uh, it's more really about, you have a very poor sense of, right and wrong, or maybe you just don't care.
Mm-hmm.
And you lack empathy. And again, with psychopathy, I think it's very similar, but I think it tends to be a little bit more violent social behavior.
Okay.
And I think that it's yeah, I think from what I know, from what I've studied, and I think that's the big difference, is that psychopathy tends to be a little bit more hostile, a little bit more
Okay.
violent, a lot more hostile, a lot more violent.
So it's
um
almost like, this it's introvert versus extrovert kind of thing, where like a psychopath is more likely to act out on how fucked
yeah,
up they.
right.
I'm sorry, not fucked up, but you know what I mean. Might be more likely to act out on due to their the disconnects that are happening versus a sociopath might just be like super awkward or like
Yeah, I was just that's a great point to make. Like a sociopath, you might just say like
that dude's
what's
weird.
wrong with this guy? Like he's
Yeah.
an asshole. But a psychopath, you would probably be like, I'm not gonna be around this guy again if I
Mm,
can help it, because
yeah.
something just seems a little,
Right. Yeah.
something
Yeah.
seems a little off.
Clearly unhinged versus like, do you not like what's up with you, dude?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. That dude's dangerous versus that guy's weird.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Okay.
Yep. Yep.
Or woman, or that woman's dangerous.
Yes. Oh,
Got
please.
it.
You have to appeal to
Mhm.
everyone.
It's 2018. It could be transgender psychopath too.
That's right.
You know,
Anything's possible.
any combination of anything.
That is true.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know if I've watched anything. Oh, so there's the new Joker portrayed by Jared Leto. Have you seen?
I
Did you
did
see
see that.
Suicide Squad?
I did. Yep, I did.
What are your thoughts on? So have you seen the Heath Ledger's Joker versus Jared Leto's Joker?
Yeah, I mean, and I'm not super familiar with both. I mean, I have seen the movies.
You
I've seen
saw the
both
movies.
movies.
What are your thoughts? That's all I'm asking. I
Um,
know you're not like a big comic book nerd or anything. Neither am I. So that's not.
right. I think, I mean, personal preference. I think I prefer Heath Ledger's portrayal
Hmm.
more so than Jared Leto.
I agree,
I
I
think
agree with that in general. I feel like they're almost a different character entirely.
okay,
You know what
but
I
you
mean?
want to,
Like Jared
yeah,
Leto's
well,
character is
talk
just
a
like
little
a
bit more about
thug.
that. Yeah,
You know what I mean? Like I've seen plenty of just portrayals of thugs in movies that act
I can see
pretty
that.
much the same way, minus the weird laughing.
Okay,
You know what I mean? He's pretty
yeah.
much just a thug, like a
Right.
huge asshole thug, versus
He's a huge asshole.
yeah, versus
He was
like
a little bit of a mean streak, and like, you know what I mean. He's a little
well yeah,
cuckoo, but no, but I know what you mean. I think that you're right though. Heath kind of was more deranged.
Deranged, right, right, and had almost had a philosophy, whereas like, yeah, Jared Leto's Joker. And now, for the record, from what I understand, there was a lot of his character development that was cut out of the movie. So obviously,
Okay.
I can't speak on anything I haven't
Right.
seen.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, he just seemed like he just had like a gangster complex, and you know,
Yeah. Well, put it this way, I was creeped out by Heath Ledger's Joker, and
mm,
I wasn't really affected at all by Jared
yeah, because
Leto's.
his was like unsettling, whereas Jared Leto
Yeah.
was like, that dude's an asshole.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I
I
don't know.
agree.
I'd be curious to see what they do with it next. Hope maybe flesh it out a little bit more, or maybe like we never really got well, there have been, I guess, some attempts at like a Joker origin story, but I would
Mhm.
like to see a new shot at it. That would be really neat, you know.
A little bit more in depth, maybe.
Yeah, maybe because I mean maybe they would do like a nature and nurture kind of thing, because I guess the whole idea of the Joker was like, I think, what was it? He was a I think one of the original stories was, I don't remember. He had some kind of job, and like wasn't getting taken. Oh, he was a stand-up comic and like was not making it, couldn't take it seriously, or nobody would take him seriously. And something happened where like Batman knocked him into like a vat of acid, and it turned his skin all white and blah blah blah. And then he decided to have,
Oh.
and it like fucked with his brain or something like that. I guess that was I think that's one of the few attempts at an origin story through the comic books that we've gotten.
Okay. Okay.
Um,
In the movie, doesn't Heath Ledger say something about somebody like like a
Well,
foster, like a
in the I
stepdad or
think there are
something
three different
life for
instances in
him?
that movie of him telling a different story about how he got the scars.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, because he's just making it up. It's three. He said, I think there's three
Oh,
different times where he says different things.
okay.
Um, I think just trying to creep out the person he's speaking to in that moment.
Gotcha.
Um, yeah, so I'd be very curious to see what they do with it next.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. Oh, yeah, I think that that character is fascinating.
Yeah, it is, because again, because it doesn't fit into any specific psychological profile that we're familiar with.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Another character that I think that was on the list. Actually, it was on the list of not being a great portrayal of a psychopath was, um, I don't know the character's name, but it's the woman from Misery,
Oh, I was say, oh, Kathy Bates.
Kathy Bates.
That's
Yeah, I
her
can't
real
think of the
name. That's
character's
her name.
name.
Yeah, I have
Yeah.
no idea.
Okay.
But
Never.
yeah,
You've never seen it?
I have seen it.
Oh, you have
I
seen it.
have
Okay.
seen it. All right. So my first of all, I can't watch Kathy Bates in anything because I saw that movie when I was probably too young. I'll never forget the scene where she breaks the dude's ankles.
I can't watch it. I
Do you
can't
know
watch
that?
that
Do you know that
scene.
in the book? Have you read the book?
No.
Oh, I've read the book.
Oh
In the
God.
book, I'm pretty sure
Even
she just
better.
cuts his feet right off, if I remember
Ugh.
correctly. Yeah, she just cuts him right off. She doesn't break his ankles. She just just lops them off.
Ugh.
Um, yeah, I can't not see that character when I see Kathy Bates in anything,
Okay.
except for when she was on The Office. When she was on The Office, I was able to. It was a totally different atmosphere, but
Right.
it made me dislike Kathy Bates for a long time because I could only see that crazy lady,
Right,
and
right.
I,
Well, she did her job.
she nailed that part.
Yeah,
I
she
couldn't
did.
even tell you who played the guy in the movie. I don't know off the top of my head.
I,
Um,
I can I can like see him in my I can picture him,
I
but I
can't
can't think of
even.
his
I
name.
might be able to pick him out of a lineup, but Kathy Bates forever burned into my memory
Yeah.
as a crazy, crazy, homely, like just weird ass lady.
So crazy.
Yeah,
Yeah, but I guess, she's been called a psychopath. That character's been called a psychopath, and um,
I didn't even
the
think of her. Well,
yeah,
for
and I mean,
if you don't know the story of Misery, it's this guy writes romance novels, I think.
yeah, yep,
So
he's
it's a
an
romance
author.
novel author, and he goes to a cabin, like in some remote part of somewhere, to like write his next book or something. And
Mm-hmm.
this lady who is a huge fan, like comes across, finds him, and like kidnaps him. And
Well, he gets in an accident.
oh, he gets in an accident. She rescues him, and it's
And
like,
she
yeah,
like wakes up in her house.
yeah. And he's like, what's up? Where am I? And she's like, oh no, it's cool. I'll take care of you, and I'll let you live as long as you tell me all your plans for the continuation of the story, and also write it the way I want you to write it. And he's like,
Mm-hmm.
fuck you. And she's like, oh yeah. And she just wrecks his shit. Like, it's
Takes a
real
sledgehammer to
bad.
his ankles.
Yeah, yeah, it's
Oh,
real bad. And, you know, he
that's a
ends up
tough
writing
scene.
it, and, you know, it's a spoiler alert, she dies. Thankfully.
I know.
But yeah, that yeah, I think it's likely that there's a lot of people like her walking around that just don't get the opportunity that the lady in that movie got.
Right.
Because I feel like I see signs in people sometimes that, like, oh man, if they could get away with it, they would do some
They
fucked
would do
up
it.
shit. Like people that definitely do like little things throughout the day
Mm-hmm.
that are like really, really fucked up.
Right.
You know what I mean? But like they get
Yeah, those
away
are the
with it,
people you
or
gotta
it's
watch out for.
what's that?
Those are the people you gotta watch out for. It's like
Exactly.
if there's ever a purge,
Oh
in America,
yeah. Oh
we're
yeah.
all we're all fucked.
Yeah, that would be real bad. Like
There's gonna be
yeah,
so many crazy people coming out of the woodworks. It's gonna
yeah.
be
You would have to just camp in a
insane.
corner and just wait.
Hide. That's what
Yeah.
I would do. I don't
Yeah.
care. Call me a
Definitely.
coward. No, I'm hiding.
Hell yeah. Hide with a weapon just in case.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
But I
would
mean, her
be.
character. Don't get me wrong. I mean, her that character has definitely got some, some psychopathic traits. But I think, the obsession was like beyond. You know what I mean? Is what I think.
Well, that was what's crazy about that was she had the obsession before that dude even came into the picture. Really, like she was
Right.
reading these books and was like putting
Mm-hmm.
herself into them, and it's
It's almost like a
identifying as.
delusional disorder.
You
There
know
you
what?
go.
You're right.
Delusional
I think
disorder.
that's probably what it would be, a super delusional disorder, and because it wasn't really like because she clearly had emotions.
Right, right. Oh yeah,
You know what I
she
mean?
loved him and she was angry when he wanted to leave and
Right, and she was very emotionally attached to the characters in the
yes,
book, you know,
yes.
as if they
Yep.
were real, you know. So I think,
Yes.
yeah, you know, my official diagnosis is delusional disorder. I think
Delusional
I'm
disorder.
gonna jot that down and that shut that case for sure.
Yep. Well,
Yeah, well, I'm so glad you
we
brought that up.
figured it out.
I haven't thought that movie in a long time. You
Yeah,
should
that
read the
was on
book
it was
though.
on that list or another list that I read about.
You should definitely read the book. The book is very good.
I should. I
have
love reading.
I
I
had
love
no
reading
idea when I read it.
so much more than watching movies.
Oh, you know when I read that book? I read that book when I was in like this big spurt of reading fucked up stuff. I was reading a lot of the Chuck Palahniuk books, the guy who wrote Fight Club.
Okay.
I probably didn't pronounce his name right, but he wrote a whole bunch of books about fucked up people, like
Yeah.
crazy people. Um,
Oh, that's a good movie. I forgot about that.
have you read the book?
I haven't read the book.
Dude, read the book.
I love that movie. I love the portrayal of the character, the main character. I mean, oh my God, we could do so
I
many
don't think
podcasts
they ever
about
actually
some.
give. I don't think they ever actually name the main character. Just so you know, if you're struggling for his name, I think it's because they don't ever give him a name.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, another movie that, well, I've seen it a couple times,
because
but it was long.
Tyler Durden is Brad Pitt's character, but that's
Mm-hmm.
the alter ego of the main character, whose name I'm pretty sure you don't ever get.
They don't ever say.
Yep.
Okay.
What you need to do is read the book. Don't do an
Okay.
audiobook. You got to read the book and then immediately watch the movie again because you'll have a whole
Okay.
new appreciation. The movie's really good. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's one instance where I can say that the movie and the book, it's definitely an apples to oranges kind of situation
Oh, wow.
because it really is because that book is written really weird,
Okay.
weirdly. It's written weirdly. Um I don't know which is right
I
grammatically.
just don't
I'm
ask
not
me about
sure.
grammar.
Listeners write in, let us know which is right. Weird, written weird or written weird. I can't. Anyway, um, yeah. So the book is written. There's a lot of like skips, and it's like narrated by the main character, but he like talks to himself, and the way stuff is jumbled around, like you have to just see it. If you open up the
Okay.
book and you'll immediately know what I'm talking about. The way it's written is really strange,
Okay.
and the way the movie is shot definitely captures it. Okay, Google. Who directed Fight Club? David Fincher.
Okay.
I knew that, but I didn't
Your
want to say
boy.
it. I didn't want to say it. Yeah, but he does all his tricks where he grabs you by the face and pulls you through the
Mm-hmm.
movie.
Mm-hmm.
And
Okay.
yeah, the way that movie is shot, I don't want to say captures the way the book it reads, but it does the best representation of what that should feel like.
Okay.
Because I
That's
mean,
good
really, at the end of the day, like you almost can't even compare a book to a movie.
then. Right.
Because at this point, I don't even like, I can't say one's better than the other because the way you consume it is worlds apart.
Totally different.
You know,
Hmm.
I just like, my question now is like, do they give the same message? And if the answer is yes, then they're both good.
Right.
One can't be better than the other because they're not the same media at all. You know,
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
they can be compared, but only in the way that like you're gonna find so many things that like, oh, was how there's
You can't go piece
yeah,
by piece, like you said. As long as the message is there, I mean, it's
right.
gonna be different.
And it is there in both of them. They're both
Gotcha.
really amazing. Also, I'm not gonna try to pronounce his name again, but the guy who wrote Fight Club
Yeah.
wrote a bunch of other books that are. If you enjoy reading Fight Club, you should read a couple of his other books because
Okay.
they're fucking crazy. And
Okay.
they're all about people who are like just screwed up in some kind of way. One of them's about a guy. What the hell is it called? It's called like the. I don't remember what it's called, but it's about a guy who was in a cult, and part
Okay.
of one of the things you do when you're in this cult is you just go out into the world and you work and you send all your money back to the cult. And one day somebody comes to his door and is like, "Listen, I'm with this anti-cult group, and I want you to know that everyone in your cult, you're in a suicide. You don't know this, but it's a suicide cult, and everyone
Okay.
else killed themselves, and you are the last one, and so don't kill yourself like this. Like, so all he's ever known was this cult that he like grew up in, and he's now trying to like assimilate into society when all he's ever known was like his contacts in the cult or whatever. And
Okay.
somebody
Okay.
got in the middle of the cult and him before he got the message to kill himself or whatever. And all this wild crazy shit happens because somebody ends up getting in his head about, because he ends up being famous because everybody knows about the cult. It's like a big huge news story.
Oh.
So he's
Okay.
famous as like the last guy from
All
the
right.
cult, and he ends up going on this like this national tour, but ends up doing all this weird shit like getting all this crazy like plastic surgery and stuff because he doesn't think he looks good enough to be on TV or whatever, taking advantage of the money and blah blah blah. Like it's just a wild ride like that.
What's
So
the
so
name of it?
I don't know the name of it. Let me see
All
if I
right.
can find the. Let's see. Chuck.
That sounds very interesting.
It is really interesting. Pal Palahniuk, and it is Survivor. It's called Survivor.
Survivor.
Yep.
All right.
He has another book called Choke, which is the story of a guy who basically goes through his life um, getting money and free meals by going to various restaurants and pretending to choke on his food. And like that's his MO. Like he pretends to end up in danger in these situations and doesn't ever have to pay for anything or whatever. But he's like the super deadbeat. And I don't remember the plot of that, but it was another really weird book about this dude that is like really fucked up.
Yeah. No
Yeah,
kidding.
it's wild, but Fight Club is definitely the most interesting exploration of that kind of idea,
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
especially because of the huge plot twist at the end,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
which is amazing. One of the
It's
best plot twists ever.
it's so amazing.
I
I
will not
agree.
spoil it. Well, I think I might have already spoiled it earlier in the conversation, but if you didn't catch the spoiler, go read Fight Club, and it's great. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was definitely a good one. I don't know. I can't think of any other famous.
Um.
I'm not sure. Oh, I do have to say, I'm going to put it on record. I do like Mads Mikkelsen's portrayal of Hannibal Lecter much, much, much better than Anthony Hopkins.
Oh.
That is not a knock on Anthony Hopkins as an actor. He is amazing.
Mm.
I just
Mm-hmm.
enjoyed watching Mads Mikkelsen more than Anthony Hopkins. And he's a little better on the eyes, too, if you ask me. Um, but I think that he just brings a sense of class and something. There's just some other element that he's able to bring to the character that I think Anthony Hopkins. I think Anthony Hopkins' character is like really creepy,
Okay. Yeah.
but Mads Mikkelsen is not creepy. He's like sexy in a weird, crazy way. It's
Hmm.
really strange. It's really strange, like
I
because
want to see what this guy
he
looks
def
like.
he definitely has like this like horrifying sexiness about him, where Anthony Hopkins does not at all. He's just
Right.
creepy, you know.
Agreed.
Whereas like
Yeah,
it,
like he's not a horrible guy to look like.
yeah,
He's not a horrible guy to look at, but I'm not like, oh, Anthony Hopkins. Like, let me put
no,
posters
I
up
mean
on
I'm
the wall.
sure in his younger years for sure, but Mads Mikkelsen, just the way he like stands and stuff, and like the way he it's just crazy because they go down the whole road of him being like you get to see a whole lot more in the show of him being like a host in his home and serving
Okay.
people food and stuff like that. Like you get a lot more of that kind of like and him charming people. You get a lot of that. And
Yeah,
people
his
just
character
being
is
like,
very
man, there's something about that guy. I really like him. You know, there's a lot of
he's
that kind of.
sucking you in, Jake. He's
It's
pulling you
exactly
in.
yeah yeah oh yeah I'd
Exactly
be murdered by
what the
well
character is supposed to
I
do.
probably wouldn't be murdered by him. I'd just be one of those people like murder no not him. You know. I don't think he'd find a reason to kill me, but I'd definitely be one of the people being like, nah, it's not him. He's not your guy.
Yeah.
No
Well, you
way.
love him so much, he wouldn't kill you.
No, he wouldn't.
You
No,
need
no.
you around.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah, if you're a mass murderer, you need as many people in your corner as possible.
That is true.
For
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, it's good. Oh, and you know who else is in the show that's really good is Lawrence Fishburne.
Oh, okay.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, plays some
I
other
feel like I
person in
haven't
the
seen him in a
FBI.
while.
Yeah, I think he's been kind of MIA. He got that Matrix money. He's chilling.
Yeah. Well,
He's
good
got
for
that.
him.
He got that Morpheus money.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Do you? Do you, Lawrence?
Yeah, you do you, Lawrence. Yeah, but that's definitely great. Cool. Well, I think this is a good point to wrap this up. So
All right.
homework is
Yes.
watch the Hannibal series
The Hannibal series.
and watch Mindhunter,
Mindhunter.
and we will reconvene when you have seen those, and
Okay.
I'll do some brushing up. We could talk a little bit more about that,
Okay.
and maybe we'll just keep that as I don't know if we could we could probably talk for another hour about those shows. I
Oh
don't
my
see why
God.
not.
Those and then I mean, the mental health field.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
I mean, I think we about covered it. I think we covered mental health
Yeah.
topic.
we talked about.
I mean,
everything.
what's the DSM? We pretty much summarized the whole thing in this.
Yeah. I mean, we could probably write the DSM-6 if we wanted to.
Easily 7 and 8
podcast.
too. Cool. Well, awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on. This was
Thanks
a
for having
blast.
me.
This was a
This was
blast,
fun.
and
Yeah.
and we'll see everybody next time.
All right. See you later.
Peace.